One of the things I want to tell you, it seems like a lack of sleep is a big problem for many people who have anxiety, but also for many people whose anxiety levels are pretty normal. All right. As we talk about the causes of the lack of sleep that we typically have, I want to start with the United States attitude towards sleep. Sleep is not a priority in the US culture. It is often seen as a waste of time. And I think that's because we have such a capitalistic kind of perspective that we think we need to be productive and working and doing things and making money, or at least staying active. And so that really causes us to diminish our commitment to getting good sleep because we just think it's a waste of our time. Another thing that causes lack of sleep is the fact that we live in a lighted environment with artificial light that follows us in our different activities throughout the day. And so, guess what? Even though it's completely dark at night, someone can work the night shift and not ever notice that it's dark because the person stays in lighted areas where they can see whatever task they're doing because they're getting paid for this task. And that constant exposure to a lighted environment, which we can get without even working at it, interferes with our ability to get good sleep. And we don't realize that we need to be in the dark for certain processes to happen to create sleep in our brain. And we'll talk more about that later. Also, another problem is the 24-hour media cycle that we have where there's constant entertainment. I'm old enough that I can remember, some people may be surprised at this, when the television went off and there was a signal on the television that meant that we were done for the day and everything was gone and you couldn't watch TV anymore. Can you imagine that now? But now we have a 24-hour media and a social media cycle where we can be talking to friends and interacting, playing games, and watching news and programs all the time. Interferes with our sleep. Also, the demands and the expectations that we find, whether it's employment or family responsibilities, often interfere with our ability to sleep. And we prioritize those needs. And sometimes that's good. You have to care for your children when they're young. You have to be up at night feeding them and caring for them. But that is something that can really interfere with your ability to get good sleep. And we really want to limit it to the stages of life with our children when they are young and not have set something that we constantly are dealing with. We need to train our children to sleep so that we can sleep and so they don't interrupt our sleep. And then sometimes you have a sleep environment that's really not conducive to sleep. Many times people don't know what you need to fall asleep. You need darkness, you need cool temperatures, you need um a peaceful environment where there aren't people like young children kicking you or pets intervening with your sleep cycles. And many of us don't even think about that. We don't think we need an environment that's conducive to sleep, often because we don't think sleep is important. Another thing is caffeine consumption. Now, nobody take away my coffee. I want my coffee. Okay. But caffeine interferes with your sleep if you drink it before 6 hours before you go to sleep. So you need to cut caffeine out of your system, or we're not going to get into the sleep cycles that we need. Also, stress and anxiety, and we'll be talking about this, is one of the main reasons people with anxiety can't sleep. And that stress and that anxiety comes from a part of your brain that's called the amygdala. Also, another problem that keeps us from sleeping is something called worry. Now, this doesn't come from the amygdala. Oh, no, no, no. Our animals, they have amygdalas too, like us, but they don't worry. It comes from the human cortex. And that problem of worry can keep a person awake. And in fact, I think humans having worry in their brains is one of the most common reasons why anxious people have trouble with knowing how to get good sleep. Okay, so what I'd like to do is take some time now to explain anxiety in the brain. Now, if some of you have been already introduced to this information, this may be a review for you, That'll be good. It'll make the little quiz you have to take at the end very easy because it's all stuff you already know when it comes to the amygdala and the cortex. But many people here are looking at this saying, I don't know what she's talking about quite yet. So just hang in with me as we explain how anxiety is produced in the brain. First of all, just to tell you what are the parts of the brain I want you to know about. And not all these parts that you see here are important for understanding anxiety in the brain. There's two parts we're going to focus on in the greatest detail, and then there's one more part that's going to be part of the pathway you need to understand, just because it's part of the pathway. The first part of the brain we'll talk about is the cortex, and this is this part of the brain here that's this curved part that is the thinking part of the brain, also the part of the brain that allows us to see and hear things and feel things. That's the cortex. It's the largest part of the brain, and it's usually the part of the brain composed of these different lobes, like the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, but you don't need to know what the different lobes are. You just need to know that this is the cortex. And it is the part of the brain that most of us think of when you say the brain. There's more parts of the brain in our skull than that. But most of us think of the cortex when we're thinking about the brain. But within the brain, we also want you to know deep inside, there's a small part of the brain right here called the amygdala. The amygdala, that is a Greek word that means almond, and that's why it's has that name, because it's shaped like a little almond. Now, I want to tell you there's two in the brain, one on the left and the right. But just like if I were talking to you about the human thumb and talk about the benefits of the opposable thumb, I don't say the thumbs all the time. Sometimes I just say the thumb, even though got two of them. Same thing with the amygdala. We got two of them, one on the left and one on the right. But it's not that important to know differences between left and right amygdala. So guess what? I'm not going to even bring that up. This is just what you need to know kind of presentation. But in case anyone ever tells you there's not just one amygdala, there's two, I don't want you to be shocked by that. There's two of them. Okay, there's one more part of the brain I'm going to want you to know to understand the pathways, and that part of the brain is the thalamus, right in the center of the brain. Something's kind of a walnut-sized part of the brain called the thalamus. And the claim to fame that the thalamus has is that it's kind of like Grand Central Station, where all the pathways from different parts of the cortex and other parts of your body are bringing information through neurons into the into the thalamus, and the thalamus, its job is to send that information where it goes in the brain. Now remember I said that the cortex is the part of the brain that helps you see things or helps you hear things. Like you probably think, listen to this, you probably think you see with your eyes. The information comes into your eye and then you see stuff. No. The way you see things is the information comes into your eyes and it's carried on through neurons back to the thalamus. And the thalamus sends it, guess where? Back here in this occipital lobe of your brain, right here. And that's when you see things, when information is processed back here in the occipital lobe, right? The thalamus knows where to send information that is coming in from, like right now, from your eyes. It knows, okay, this information came from the eyes. I got to send it back here to the back part of your brain. Okay, this information's coming in through your ears, what you're listening to me, and that's sound waves that are hitting your eardrum, and they get translated into neural signals, and they get taken up here into your um, temporal lobe in this area right in here. And this area right here is where you hear things, not from your ears. It's when you get it processed in your brain. All right. So the important thing about the thalamus is it knows where to take whatever information is coming in from whatever. Even right now, if you're sitting down while you're listening to me and you can feel your seat, right, where your butt's sitting on that seat, whatever it happens to be, right? That information has to come up your spinal cord, and guess where it goes? To the thalamus. And the thalamus says, oh, that needs to be processed right up here on the top of your head. That's where it gets processed in sensory cortex, where it feels the information coming up, right? Your from your skin, from your muscles and all whatever's being felt in your joints, got arthritis, feeling it up there, right? You're not feeling it in your joints. You just know that's where the feeling comes from. All right, so the thalamus is very important just because it is like Grand Central Station receiving information and sending it on. All right. So hopefully, if you could just remember cortex, big curved part of the brain, right? Second part, amygdala, small almond shaped part of the brain. And then third, thalamus, center part of the brain, kind of like Grand Central Station. That's what you got to remember. Now, I'm going to try to make that easier for you. Here, I have this all written out very clearly about the different pathways, right? Now, what I'm going to do though, is I'm going to say that as you understand these two pathways, there's a reason why understanding both pathways is important. Because if you want to be a good therapist treating anxiety, you need to understand both of the pathways. If you only treat one of these pathways, you are not going to be effective at treating anxiety. You need to treat both pathways. Okay, so